restorative justice, just what Judge Hall said so passionately, it's really about building relationships. And that's what we had to do at Fenger High School. When I came to Fenger High School, I didn't know any of these young people. I was new to the staff. The school was just turned around. Everybody was new. We just met the principal. You know, everybody was new. But the young people were hurting. They were hurting because they lost all the people that they had relationships with. They lost the people those were their protective factors. They lost all the people that were their mentors. And here you got all these young people coming in talking about, go to class. Get to class. They said, we're not going to class. We're going to fight. And it was like a revolt in the school almost every day. Fighting us. I couldn't believe it. We needed support and help from others from the community, our police and others. But our principal realized that this was not going to work when you're talking about long term. 0 times may work for the immediate, to kind of send a clear message that we have this is a new situation, a new day. But it shouldn't be long term, continuing on and on and on and on and on, and think it's going to change behavior. So I started out as the chief dean, so my role was to deal with all the discipline. So you know that's why I lost all this hair on my head. Got punched in the jaw. I mean, I went through. But the principal realized we got to change the whole game, and we got to shift this away from being a dean to now culture and climate. Because that's what's important in a school. If you don't feel good, you're not going to do good. And if you don't feel connected, you're going to be disconnected. And if you don't feel loved, you're definitely not going to act right. And children, young people respond to love. I'm going to say it again. Young people respond to love. In a way, somebody said, old people too. How many respond to love? That's the thing. Show hands. Would you respond better if I loved you or if I hated you, right? Everybody here understands that. And so, talking about the values of restorative justice, you're going to get that when you get into each room. Love is a part of that, right? And so as I went through the process, we created a peace room. I began to create opportunities for young people to actually lead and become peer jurors. We actually become peace ambassadors in the school. We had peace rallies where we would bring everybody from all over, Kathy and Judge, everybody came and they were there and they spoke to the young people, encouraged them to stay peaceful, and then we all broke out like we're going to do today, and we all went into rooms like this, and we all sat down and we all sat in circles to talk about what it is it means for us as a school to move forward. We just had a devastating situation. A young man died. How do we heal? How do we rebuild? How do we do this? How do we be titans? And all of a sudden the young people started realizing, man, these people really do care about us. Maybe we need to listen to them. Maybe these crazy people coming in with a rock and a rug got something to this. Huh? They laughed. They didn't know. I said, I'm bringing a new technology. It's not on a computer screen. It's what we've done as people. Every people have done what we're doing. This is not nothing new. This is all in our DNA of how we build community. So let me throw some numbers out to you to just kind of let you know what had happened in terms of the transformation in numbers. And I'm going to bring our young people to come up and speak in terms of their story. First off, we had an 80% reduction in misconducts, which means that young people that were going to the dean's office didn't go to the dean's office as much, they came to my office. And when they came to my office, they came to resolve their conflicts and didn't have to go to the dean's office, so the dean didn't have to write it off as a suspension or a potential expulsion. Or let's call the police because this child is off the chain. And some of our children are off the chain, but they got a right to be off the chain. Some of them, they're dealing with some difficult things. But it's good for them to vent in my room than to vent in the dean's office or even in the police room. Right. You know, or even, thank you. Right? Because our teachers have enough to do. And so we give those supports to our school and to our teachers so that they know that that peace room is also available for them. So you know teachers fall out with each other. You know that, right? They fall out. Somebody stole something. Somebody said, he say, she say, go around, and it does too. It don't stop, right? But what's beautiful is that they can come to my office and they can sit down and resolve it before I go to the principal's office. Right? And so this culture and climate is not just for the young people. It's for everybody. Everybody has an opportunity to resolve conflict within each other. And that was the genius of our principal, Elizabeth. Give her a hand, by the way. I know she's not here, but give her a hand. Especially a principal at Fenger High School where everybody's looking at you and wanting to see if you're going to fail. But I'm glad that she's now realizing what she saw in her vision for the school. That our school will be a school of peace. Our children will go to class. They'll go 4 minutes. Then when they get to class, they'll sit down and learn. And then when they leave class, they're happy. They kiss the girlfriend, the boyfriend, they talk about this, they talk about that. and they feel encouraged and they feel inspired to come back to school. So I want to bring my two young men, Brother Phil. Come on, give Phil a hand. I'll start with Marvin first, because we talked about, I think just talk about victims and offenders and in the community and how we, work in this restorative justice. So Marvin came to our peer jury. How many of you familiar with peer jury? Right? So our peace ambassadors. He was a student that came to our peer jury as a victim. The student that was referred to us had said something very disrespectful to him. He kind of blew it off, but the teacher heard it and was like, you need to go to the dean. The dean then said it to myself, and then as we began to talk, we realized we need to bring Marvin into this conversation because he heard Marvin. He didn't heard the teacher. He heard Marvin. And so we brought Marvin into the room, and Marvin had a chance to sit down with those young people and tell them just a little bit about how did it feel to sit in that room and hear that young man interact with you.
Man, all right, bear with me. But anyway, I mean, I was all right with it, because I didn't really hear it. And usually we play around, but I guess the teacher didn't think it was, like, playful at the time. So when I was in the room, he was talking like, Marvin, I said something about you. I'm sorry. I'm like, oh, it's okay, Darius. But anyway, his name Darius. He was like, I said, it's okay, I forgive you and stuff. And then it was like, he felt better when we started laughing and, started feeling better about ourselves. So I was like, said this in my head, like, I should come back here more, Because, like, I like being in here now, because then I came back a couple of times and seeing some more of what they do, they was resolving conflict. And then I just like coming back now, it's something I like seeing.
Get a right hand. Now, Brother Philip was a referred student. He was the offender on the other side of the situation. And his situation, though, was a little deep because the student that he was in interaction with, they cool, but the student did something that harmed him. And so he felt like he needed to harm him back. And the teacher was like shocked because they don't do that. And, try to have a conversation with them. And he was still upset. So the only thing the teacher saw was the fact that he was doing the harm. He was doing, they were horse playing, so to speak. But really, he was upset that the young man, the young man had taken his cookies. And was in the back there eating the cookies and then tried to lie, and the crumbs all around his mouth. I don't know what you're talking about. So fell right down. He said, come on, man. And so he was very upset, but he was seen as the offender because what they saw was him going at the boy. And so when he came down to peer jury, it was very interesting because that young man, I think, was, Dean decided to do something else with him. But when he came down, we were able to realize that hurt people hurt people. And that the victims of today will become the offenders of tomorrow if their needs are not met. And so as they were sitting down talking, Phil, tell a little bit about how it felt for you in terms of being a referred student, one in trouble.
I feel like it wasn't my fault. I felt like that I shouldn't have acted like that.
Can't hear. Speak a little louder.
Leave him alone now, y'all. Has restored justice here.
I can say that. I can say I know it. I know it.
I felt like I was a little upset. I was just going to get my stuff back, and I was referred to be down there, but I felt like it was good that I didn't have to be suspended or in school or nothing like that.
Absolutely. And another thing I want to say, and want Phil to talk about is what things do the monitor or the peer jury what things are they going to help you with now? He's a senior, so listen very closely about what things they're going to help you with. Go ahead.
I got somebody to monitor me. They're going to make sure my grades up. Make sure I get my service made out. So I graduate.
Did y'all hear that? So we got this student that's now, one of our students is now going to work with him to make sure that he can walk the stage in May. Because he's a senior. And he needs to get service learning as well as grades up. I just wanted to show you, come on, give these young men another hand. Totally left, as you can tell, right? If we had a knee-jerk reaction to this, he could have been suspended, right? Easily, not a problem. Could have given him a few days out, right? Think about it. In his case, we would have never, even though he didn't hear about it, we would have never got to the point where he was able to actually say, you know what, I'm glad that you owning up to what you did, and I forgive you. The power of forgiveness. We didn't tell him to do that. He did it on his own because he didn't want the young man to walk around and think he was still holding something against him. This is the power of restorative justice. This is it. We know what's happening to our black males. We know what's going on. We know what's happening. But this is what can stop this schoolhouse to jails pipeline. This can stop pushing our children out. This can stop the violence. But we as a community have to wrap our arms around these young men and teach them that they can be what they want to be. Right? What do you want to do after you graduate, brother?
I want to study aviation.
Come on, give them a hand. Come on, give them a hand. So make sure you see her, okay? Find some money for her. I'm serious. You guys give them a hand. Thank you guys so much. I'm so glad that you guys did this. Thank you again, Captain. Thank you.
Talking about NIU and CSU. Well, now that's with our next success story, we have Eammanuel, Andre, and Ethan
Ucker.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
And that's the limit of my Spanish. Good morning, my name is Eammanuel Andre. I'm co-director of Circles and Ciphers.
My name is Ethan Ucker. I'm the other co-director.
So,
we founded the organization together. Circles and Ciphers, just real brief, is a youth leadership development organization. We're based on the North Side, and we fuse restorative justice practices and principles with hip-hop, arts, and culture.
So everyone say, Now how in the world do you do that? You take an ancient program like restorative justice and you try to fuse it with what's happening on the ground with hip-hop and art. So what we'll do real quick is just going to go into the history, how we met, and how it came along. Then we're also going to talk quickly about our current programming. And then third, just the logistical part, just so if there's someone out there who has just this idea in their head, how do you go from that idea to realizing it and making it into a practice?
And I just want to say we were holding a spot here today for one of the young guys that we work with who was going to be here today and had to cancel last minute, but sends his best wishes and wishes he could be here. I wish he could see you guys now.
Yes, 7:30 in the morning is still a challenge. So, I guess just real quick, going into the history. Originally, I'm from Harlem, New York. Been in Chicago now for almost 3 years, I think. Came over to Chicago, knew nothing about restorative justice. Actually, I did take a class in law school on restorative justice, but it was very different. It was more so focused on the mediation aspect of things. And I was living in Rogers Park. Rogers Park is a community far north, way north. How many people here ever heard of Rogers Park? Whenever y'all up there, y'all need to come see us. I know some good Asian restaurants. And come sit in the circle with us. But at that time, I just was transitioning, and there was a lot of stuff happening in Rogers Park, as there still is right now. And I wanted to know, what can I do? What should I do? At that time, I saw a publication for, anybody here ever heard of Project Nia, Miriam Kaba? Yeah. There was a Peace Circle training program that was happening. And I decided to attend. Now that my wife is not here, I'm going to tell you the real reason I went to attend. At that time, I had 2 kids, and I really needed a moment to get away. So I went over to that program, and that's when I met people.
So I came a very different route. Eammanuel was a lawyer. My background is mostly as a teaching artist and working with young people in a variety of settings. And I came to restorative justice out in Philly. I'm a Chicago native, but I went to school outside of Philadelphia, and I worked with men who were lifers, serving life without parole sentences at a state penitentiary outside of Philly. And that was sort of my introduction to the framework of restorative justice. A lot of these guys who have been in for 30, 40, 50 years were starting to really take accountability transform themselves. That a lot of them were meeting with the families of their victims and doing really strong and deep work. So I got to kind of be a fly on the wall. I knew nothing about it, but that was I kind of got thrown in. So when I came back to Chicago, also North Side native, I went to the same training, which was held. I know we already gave her a shout out, but maybe one more hand for Aura. So Eammanuel and I attended, I think it was a 4-day training with Aura, and that's how we started to get to talk.
So during that training, we figured, we come to find out that we had a lot of similarities. We both really love hip-hop, and we both really was interested in working with young people. And at that time, in Rogers Park, there was a group home where all the kids was being pushed out because the community felt most of the kids coming from that group home was the source of all the rivalries and the major crimes, and they wanted them out. That was the way to solve it. Send them to police, send them away for a long time, and just close down the group home.
So it was really during that circle training, it was 4 days, a lot of time together to talk and strategize about that, and knowing some of the problems that this community was having with the group home, that we started talking about what we could do about it. And what we came away with is we just started having circles with some of the young men who were in that group home. I think initially it was just the young men. A couple of the staff members became involved. We met twice a month, very informally. We didn't know, and the idea of circles and ciphers and our sort of pedagogy of using hip hop, that wasn't formalized yet. We were just sort of improvising and bringing the hip hop experience and interest that we both have, and which we shared with the young people, into the circle keeping framework. Again, this like urban tradition mixed with this like Aboriginal ancient tradition, right? So we started working with these guys, meeting up on the north side, creating a safe space with them. And it became a really powerful space. Immediately, they took to it. This is a space they could talk about the challenges they were facing, the needs that they had, the problems that they were having with the community, with each other, with different staff, in school, with their families. And it became just like a really, they needed it. They needed that space, and they kept coming back. They brought other guys from the group home, other residents. And we started to notice a shift in the way that they were interacting with each other, the way that they were interacting with staff from the group home, the way that they were sort of proceeding in their lives and as young men and in their sort of growth and maturation. So, we kind of stuck with it.
Now, what's important to remember about this, right? We weren't afraid to be vulnerable. And I think that's something that's often lost. We really wanted to stay away from the process of, you need to do this, you need to do that. Even in the circle, it still happens. Because at that time, we wasn't even really calling the circle. We said, look, let's get together with some of these guys. We both love music, particularly hip-hop. Let's see what they want. Let's see what they want to bring to the table. Now, of course, some of their hip-hop songs were very different than what we listened to. But there were some similarities. But what's important, though, is I think we took the time to break it down and to actually listen to it. We'll give you a quick example. Chief Keef. We all know Chief Keef, the Chicago Sun. Whether you want him or you don't, he is Chicago Sun. He has a song, I Hate Being Sober. So instead of us coming in, we haven't used the song yet, but instead of us coming into the guys and saying, this is why you need to stay away from drugs, this is why you need to stay away from drugs, we could share our own personal experiences, high school, college, graduate school, whatever, professional careers, and let them know how adults struggle with the same thing, right? And take that theme that Chief Keef has that they'll listen to, I hate being sober, and what that means and how that promotes.
This was especially powerful in that group home setting, because the relationship a lot of these young guys had with their staff members was the one that Eammanuel was talking about. You need to do this, you need to stop doing this, you need these disciplinary sanctions, things like that. Suddenly we got some of the staff to come and participate, sit in circle with us, and sort of we could see in them that shift in the mentality from do this to, oh, I'm just sharing my experience. And I'm listening to the way that others are sharing their experience, and I'm learning from that, building that empathy and building that community.
So that's the history. Now, how do we transition to becoming current and to becoming what we are today, circles and ciphers? From that, what we noticed was there was a group of in the young men, a lot of them constantly told us, well, we want something more consistent, we want something formalized, we want some money. And that's a real reality. We want some money. So what we decided at that time, I believe Ethan had a connection with the program called After School Matters. We really built the program around the young men to give them an opportunity to sit in this space and to show that their time is valuable. I think that's one of the most important things you can do. Actually showing someone that, no, your time is valuable and your stories are equally as valuable. Because one quick thing, and Brother Spicer, he's doing amazing things at the school, absolutely amazing. The young men we work with are the young men who's on, if they are in school, they're in the margins. They're about to get kicked out. But the vast majority, everyone's out of school, everyone's gang affiliated, which I think Chicago was something we need to address. As Chicago's a gang city. A lot of our young men are involved or affiliated in certain ways. What we were seeing on the ground is a lot of programs will automatically cut you off and say, okay, you're affiliated, I don't care how or what, you can't participate in that. Which is really troublesome when you think about it. Because some of these young men, you're born into this. We're talking about second generation, third generation. So what are we saying to them right off the bat? So that's why it was critically important that we find a way to value their time, to value their stories.
Once you build a safe space, once you really have a space where you feel comfortable sharing, then you can ask the questions that I think make people critically consider their gang affiliation. Why? What do you value about a gang? What are you getting out of that? What kind of protection? What kind of community? What kind of brotherhood? What kind of responsibility? What kind of money in your pocket? All these things. And they're sort of looking at that a little more critically than maybe they were initially, right? So I think that's the idea. It's not to tell someone to leave the gang in order to participate in this space. It's simply to really look at what needs are being met by that community and figure out it with them if that's what they want. And if it's not, what are other ways that those needs can get met?
So from there, that's our community program. We have a couple of other programs that have been built out of there. Right now, currently, we're working with a local high school in the Rogers Park area, focused once again on, they gave us a group of about 15 guys. They said, look, they're all young affiliated. There have been multiple fights. We're just really worried that they're going to have a shootout and it's going to be on campus. My worry is that they have a shootout, period. I don't care where it's at. But from there, we actually went into the school, which we're currently doing now, where we're meeting with the young men once a week, developing this space and sort of developing methods to help motivate them to keep their school and show those links.
Yeah, I think we also have a program at the detention center at the Audi home down on Hamilton and Roosevelt, for those who know it. So we're meeting with a group of young men there, all automatic transfers. So these are juveniles who have an adult case on their 18th birthday. They'll be shipped on over to Cook County Jail. So as you can imagine, they have a whole different set of challenges that they're facing and things that they need out of this space. But that's another one of our programs, group home, and then our community program. And what we've begun to do in Rogers Park with some of the young men who have been working with us for a while is train them at restorative justice practices. So these are young restorative justice practitioners who are strong, like they're bringing themselves and their experience to this work and can speak to the value of shifting that frame and what that was able to do for them. And I think a big theme that we're always talking about in all these programs, again, the needs are going to be real different in a high school versus a detention center versus a group home versus a community setting, but legacy, we're always talking about legacy. Defining your legacy by having a space to really look at the choices you've made and to add them up and see where they came from and what you inherited. And then if the space is there, to transform it or redefine it in the ways that you want to. So whether it's a legacy of how is violence part of your legacy? How is incarceration part of your legacy? How is disengagement woven into what you were bequeathed, what you were born into? So I think we are always sort of trying to frame anything from a conflict to a discussion about manhood to a discussion about girls to a discussion about relationships, whatever it is. In a circle, we're always trying to frame that in the long view in terms of legacy. What is your legacy?
Now, Kathleen is looking at me. She wants some success stories. So, either if you want to talk about the conflict.
Yeah. So all these programs have been built through the relationships, and Robert Spicer spoke on it. But that's just if we're gonna talk the talk, we got to walk the walk, right? So that's how we do it. We build relationships with service providers in our community. We're based out of the United Church of Rogers Park. We have a wonderful relationship with them. We already mentioned Project Nia, Laura and Cheryl, just tons of restorative justice folks, teaching artists, hip-hop artists. You know, those are the relationships that we use and leverage those into providing this space for young men. So we got approached over the summer, this past summer. There was a lot of violence in the community. It was hot, you know, and there was a huge fight. I think about seven girls were involved. So what we came in to do with them is look at, you know, instead of sending them off, a couple of them getting locked up, others of them getting kicked out of whatever summer job programs they were involved with, we got brought in to kind of help work that conflict with them. So we sat in circle for several days, really intensively with first just a couple of the girls who had been involved, then a couple more and more of the stakeholders, more and more of the people involved. And in all those conversations, what we found is the circle kind of widened. So one girl would talk about how she actually had a conflict not just with that girl that she got into a fight with, but that girl's mom, right? So it went back a generation. So we brought in the mothers. We started talking about what was going on. It turned out that the conflict, the root of the conflict, when we really sat in circle for a week, you know, really had these conversations, it started a generation back. The mothers of these girls had a conflict that they inherited. And they didn't even know why. They kept saying, we've been fighting since we were in kindergarten. We've been fighting and fighting. And their mothers, like, they used to be best friends. Now they're fighting. No one knows why. We've been trying to figure this out. We've been trying to resolve this conflict for years. No one knows why. It turns out that's because what was being addressed in terms of what was being healed wasn't the real root of the problem. Like, really where that lay was a generation back. And once we were able to call that out, root it up, kind of unbury that, then we could really make some progress in terms of healing and resolving the conflict.
That's a perfect example. And then real quick, I don't want you all to leave that with the impression that we do that all the time and there's no challenges. So I'm going to real quick throw out a challenge that we've had. Now, with all this said, we have one young man in particular, very consistent. It's been, when we first met him, he was on probation. A couple of months after we met him, and he's been consistently participating in the group, he came to us. He said, I have to talk to you. I said, what's going on? He opens up his bag, and he has a laptop in his bag. What? You got a laptop in your bag? And he shows me his hands. He said, well, I was drunk over the weekend, and I broke into a home. I want to return this, but I don't know what to do. I was trapped, because now, automatically you want to run. It's okay, great. What he wanted to do was have a peace circle around. He wanted us to go and get the victim, bring them in to the church, and have a peace circle around them. Unfortunately, there's a lot of limitations on that because I have no idea who this victim is. This guy's on probation. If I bring in the victim and the victim's like, oh my God, I want to bring in the court, press charges, he's on probation, he's going away. That's a real challenge. It's a challenge about how we merge this process with these various institutions that's at play, these various stakeholders. So that's something to continue to keep in mind. Just real quick, I think logistics in terms of how do we make it happen. I think what's most important out of it, whatever you come out, as you're sitting in these circles, this is the time those ideas come. This is the time. Think about what you love doing. Think about what it is that you love doing, and just write it down. And most important, once you find someone who has some of those common grounds with you, I think it's just staying with you. Perfect. Thank you very much.